Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome into the Illini Nation pregame show. I'm Marlee Wierda. Andy Olson and Jeremy Werner will be joining me live in just a few moments from West Lafayette as we get ready to preview Illinois' first Big Ten road game of the season against Purdue. It's a 2:30 kickoff on Big Ten Network. Illinois coming into this one 1-3. Purdue 2-1. Illinois has a chance to go 2-1 in the Big Ten, a great opportunity for them on the road with the Cannon Trophy on the line. And without further ado, let's head out to Andy Olson and Jeremy Werner, who are live at Ross Ade Stadium. Guys, it looks like a picture-perfect day for some football.
Yeah, I mean, if we had a camera person, it'd be a lot better, so we can kind of work with this sun that's going in and out behind the clouds. But Marlee, it is absolutely beautiful out here. We have a nice little perch above Ross Ade Stadium here in West Lafayette. Like you already said, Jeremy Werner from IlliniInquirer.com joining myself, Andy Olson. It's an exciting game. Marlee went over all the facts about why this is exciting, but Illinois really needs this one, I'd say, Jeremy. I mean, 3 straight losses coming in after that season-opening win against Nebraska. What are your thoughts coming in about how this season has gone so far and how important this matchup is?
Well, August went pretty well. You know, you get all this hope. You get a win at the end of it with the Week 0 win over Nebraska. September has not gone well at all, and this is the last chance for Illinois to leave this month with a win. They could go winless if they lose today, and they are 11-point underdogs today. But this is probably one of the most winnable Big Ten games left on the schedule, because you feel like for once health is on your side. You're starting to get a healthy crew back. Brandon Peters, you hope, is better in his second start from injury. But Doug Kramer's back. Julian Pearl is back. Your running backs who are really effective, Chase Brown and Josh Mcrae, are back. And on the other side, Purdue, some of their best players on offense, Mershawn Rice, a good wide receiver, Xander Horvath, their best running back, who kind of reminds people of Mike Allstott, he's out. And we still don't know if David Bell, their star wideout, future NFL guy, is going to be available today after he went through concussion protocol. So this feels like one of your best chances to win. It's just hard, given the last month, to predict Illinois to win. But I do feel like you're going to have some opportunities in this game if they play like they did against Nebraska a month ago.
And Purdue's had an interesting start to the season as well. Of course, that game against Oregon State, an alliance game, probably one of the first since that has been announced. But like you said, Illinois comes in with the chance to have some opportunities to go and win this game. Now, it's all about whether or not they take those opportunities. You mentioned the guys coming back, and I think a big one, Keith Randolph. I saw him warming up before the game. He had breakout games. He had a sack and a forced fumble that turned into the touchdown that Calvin Hart Jr. took back against Nebraska. Had another sack then against UTSA, going back in my head, trying to remember the schedule at this point, but came out injured in that game, missed the next 2. He's back in this game. What do you think having someone like Keith Randolph on that defensive line does for Illinois?
Yeah, thanks for bringing up him. I forgot that he was coming back, and I just saw him on the field coming off. He was punting his chest right as he was coming off the field. He's ready to go, and he was one of their best defensive players the first 2 weeks. That made them somewhat effective the first 5 quarters of the season that he was in. He had 2 sacks, as you said, and he's one of the best defensive linemen. And as you're looking for building blocks, because this season hasn't gone the way they hoped. The postseason seems like really long odds right now. Keith Randolph's going to be a fixture, a foundation piece for Brett Bielema moving forward. But the defensive line played a lot better last week, right? I mean, you had Seth Coleman up front, another redshirt freshman who looked really, really effective. You had Keith Randolph for that. Owen Carney had a sack last week. Johnny Newton, another freshman who had a sack last week. Those guys need to get going against Purdue offensive line. That isn't all that great, kind of like Maryland last week. So Illinois needs to get pressure on the quarterback, because we know the pass defense, otherwise the secondary, has really struggled. But to get Keith Randolph back to help build off that solid defensive performance last week, where, to be honest, Andy, the defense played well enough to win. Even though they gave up yards, they got off the field on 3rd down, they put pressure on the quarterback, and they didn't give up a ton of big plays. They're going to have to do that yet again this week against a potent Purdue passing attack.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Seth Coleman, because I thought he had a fantastic game. He was one of the guys that got into the starting lineup actually last week, as well as Taz Nicholson in the secondary. You mentioned building blocks. Do you think this is going to be another game where maybe Brett Bielema and Tony Walters go with some of those younger guys and try and get them more experience?
Well, I think they're still trying to win football games.
Yeah.
I don't think we're at the point of the season where you just punt on these super seniors, because they still give you mostly the opportunity to win. What I think you saw last week is they've learned about their team, what works, and more importantly probably what doesn't. And that Isaiah Gay wasn't performing well enough. Tony Adams wasn't playing well enough. So they put guys in there who maybe give them a little bit more, as the kids say, juice. And Seth Coleman is one of the best athletes on this team, and he showed it last week. So he's going to get more playing time. Taz Nicholson struggled at times, but I thought he gave you a little bit more energy, a little bit more competitiveness, and I just think mentally gave them a lift. To be honest with you, I think the defensive side of the ball, they have some things they can build on. I want to look on, do they make those kind of changes on the offensive side of the ball, right? Do you get different receivers in there who maybe are a little bit more talented? And obviously, I went to Josh Mcrae a lot more last week, along with Chase Brown. I expect that to continue. But at quarterback, they need Brandon Peters to really step up. And if he doesn't, are they willing to maybe look elsewhere to give you a little bit of a spark? But even giving guys like Isaiah Williams the ball more, Deuce Spann more reps, I think it'll be really interesting to see. Ryan Walters made the changes on defense last week they needed to make. Does Tony Peterson on offense make the changes they need to make?
The running back room is one of my most looked forward to things of the game, I think, and we'll get to that in a second, but that's what we have on defense, Marlee. I know that was a big talking point for the coaches this week as well, leading up to the game.
It was, because Illinois so desperately needed some defensive improvements. I think we saw it a little bit against Maryland. I'll be excited to see what they do today against Purdue, and here's a little bit on the players and just what they thought about being able to get over that hump a little bit and make some improvements against the Terrapins.
Definitely feel like we needed that. Definitely with the past few games, I feel like it encouraged the defense and gave us a big boost. So I feel like that game against Maryland really helped the defense grow confidence.
We have a good defense, a great D coordinator, and great coaches. It's just making the plays and being on the same page.
And a little change for defensive coordinator Ryan Walters. This week they mentioned that he moved from the booth. He'll now be on the field for the foreseeable future, and I think that could make a big difference for Illinois. He said he liked being down there in the field, being in the action. We'll see if that makes an improvement today against Purdue. But Jeremy, you mentioned Brandon Peters a little bit. We talked about him briefly, but I see this as a game where he really needs to make some significant improvements. I mean, he's a third-year starting quarterback for this team. He hasn't really had a good game since maybe last season. I know he missed most of these first couple of games, with the exception of, a couple of snaps against Nebraska early on. But against Maryland, I didn't see a lot from him. I mean, what kind of game is this for Brandon Peters? What does it mean for him? And, why does he need to improve?
Yeah, Marlee, I think the leash is shorter on Brandon Peters for Illini fans and Illini observers than maybe it is for this coaching staff that had high expectations. They see practice every day, and it's clear they think he's the most talented option they have back there. But if we look back in the last 2 years, he helped Illinois get to a bowl game in 2019. I think the Cal performance, he showed some toughness. We haven't seen that same player the last 2 years. His completion percentage is under 50% the last 2 seasons. Now, you can blame that on COVID last year, missing 3 games because of that. You can blame that on this year getting hurt. But at some point, they need their quarterback to step up. Now, I want to say this. Brandon Peters did not get enough protection last week. The offensive line did not play well enough, especially in that final awful drive. And the receivers aren't performing very well. This isn't a very talented wide receiver group, especially the guys they're playing, and they're not getting enough separation. But they still need their quarterback to lift them. And under Brandon Peters the last couple years, they just have been lifeless. So they need him to step up, and they think that going into week 2 as a starter, kind of getting him back into the flow, maybe he can hit his stride. But for me, if I'm the staff, I don't know how long that leash is. Artur Sikowski, I think obviously is a flawed quarterback. I don't know if he's your answer long term. You're probably going to be looking in the transfer portal again this offseason. But they need to figure out, I think today, Marlee, I think Marlee's right, is Brandon Peters your best option moving forward? He's close to home. This is a school that didn't want him the second time around. Can he step up and perform? They don't need him to outplay Jack Plummer. they need him to make sound decisions, be efficient, and to make some plays downfield, and to just give this team a little bit of spark, because it did feel like first game, Artur Sitkowski gave that team a little bit of life, a little bit of leadership. I haven't seen that yet from Brandon Peters.
It's going to be spicy to watch. I'm looking forward to that as well. And I wanted to go back to something you touched on, the offensive line. It felt like the entire offseason, one of the biggest talking points was all of the experience coming back on that line. Over 100 starts between everyone that was coming back. Jeremy, what do you think, or what have you seen maybe go wrong that they're having such a tough time to begin the year?
I think the players you thought would be good have been pretty good, actually. Doug Kramer, who is back today, I think that's really good. He's been phenomenal. Like, if you watch he has been really good. I think Vidarian Lowe has been solid. I don't know if he's taken a huge leap, but I think he's a solid player. Had a bad moment last week, late in the game where he got beat on a bull rush. Alex Palczewski struggled as a pass blocker. He has through most of his career at right tackle, but he's been devastating as a run blocker. But what teams are doing, because they don't respect the Illini passing attack, they're loading the box. So it's 7 and 8 guys against the run. You can't expect 5 guys to block 7 or 8 guys. So they need the passing game to get going a little bit, and that certainly hasn't been the case. But I do think the guard positions, they have struggled. When you lose Kendrick Green, it's not a surprise that you're going to go down a little bit at that guard position. Blake Jairosadi hasn't been quite as good as they thought. Jack Badovanek, who started the last couple weeks, they like a little bit what they've seen. And Alex Pilstrom's a converted walk-on tight end, playing his second year of offensive line. So they've really struggled at those positions, probably more so than they thought they would, especially as pass blockers. But they got to be better. I think this is a game, obviously George Karlaftis of Purdue, he's projected to be a first-round pick, and he's one of the best prospects in all of college football, one of the best pass rushers. I think the tight ends, Tip Ryman, Luke Ford, are going to get involved in blocking him, but I think they should have opportunities to run the ball. It's going to be on the offensive line. I think the passing attack to open up some of those lanes.
Yeah, and we teased this before, and now I want to kind of get into it. The running back room, Josh Mcrae, Chase Brown, both back, and it seemed like for that little stint in last week's game against Maryland, when they were both good to go and they were both on, looked like Illinois had something there going. I mean, the freshman Mcrae, I believe you singled him out before the season as someone who may be able to help this team immediately as far as the freshman class goes. But with those two guys back, how do you think it affects the way that Illinois calls the game on offense when you have that reliability?
If there's one thing before the season that we thought would be good, and it has been good, it's the running backs. And Chase Brown, I want to start with him. I know people are excited about Josh Mcrae, and you should be. You still got 2 more years of Chase Brown after this one, too, and he has been their best player the last 2 weeks. 180 total yards. They've really gotten involved in the passing game as kind of a dump-off option, but he can make people miss. He can run through people. He's probably the best player on this team the last couple weeks, but Josh Mcrae is right up there. Gives you a different option than Chase, right? He's a big back, bounces off people. He's hard to bring down with arm tackles, and that run last week, the 40-yard touchdown run, was one of the most exciting plays of the season that you think, man, this guy can be a lead back someday. So I think those guys just continue to do what they do. Tony Peterson continue to feed them the ball. I don't think we'll see much of Reggie Love. Obviously, Chase Hayden hasn't been in the plans here lately, and Mike Epstein, unfortunately, has suffered another injury. We don't know how long he'll be out, but it doesn't sound like he'll be back for a while. So it seems like those are the 2 guys. Those are your 2 best offensive weapons right now. Get them the ball, but Tony Peterson probably going to have to get him the ball in some interesting ways, maybe in the pass game a little bit more, just to get him out in the open field a little bit.
Yeah, Josh Mcrae on that 40-yard run got right in my face at the end of that. I was perfectly positioned for it last week, so we'll see if we get another one this week. Part of that, one of the things people want to know about getting the ball to players, tight ends. I've seen it a lot on social media. I believe it wasn't a lot of targets last week. I think they want to see them get more involved. Jeremy, what have you seen from Barker and Ford, who we've seen in spurts can be really good guys, can make great plays for the team?
I think Tony Peterson would agree. Daniel Barker and Luke Ford haven't had enough catches and touches the last couple weeks. But I will say this, unlike the Virginia game, I thought they really targeted those guys a lot. Tony Peterson had a lot of plays designed to get them the ball, a few rollouts. I thought Maryland, to their credit, covered it really well. They got a star safety in the back. But I also thought Brandon Peters didn't get them the ball very well. I mean, you think of that interception Seth Coleman forces his fumble. You feel like that game's turning and Illinois can take the lead. The first play, Brandon Peters has Luke Ford open, overthrows him for an interception. They call another play in the red zone where it was designed for Luke Ford to get the ball. Luke was only open for a split second. Maryland covered it well, and Brandon Peters missed his split second. So I think they had some opportunities last week that they didn't take advantage of, but they got to get them the ball more. The other guy is Isaiah Williams.
Yeah.
2 touches last week. You know, early on, first couple of games, they gave him some of these shovel passes, some reverses. They haven't done that recently. They're treating him more like a normal wide receiver, which he's not. I mean, he's not a proven wide receiver quite yet, so you got to find a force feed him the ball. I'm interested to see if Tony Peterson gets him more involved. And Andy, he's a former quarterback.
Yeah,
he can throw the ball a little bit. Deuce Spann can throw the. Are we going to see any trickeration? Are we going to see those guys maybe get a little bit more creative? I think if there's been one criticism of Tony Peterson, who doesn't have a lot to work with, is he getting enough creativity to get his playmakers the ball?
I'd love to see one of that. I can imagine it right here. You passed Isaiah in the backfield. Deuce goes down the field wide open. I don't know. Maybe we're feeling something today on that. But Marlee, clearly, even during this whole week, you know, passing game has been one of the big topics we've talked to coaches and players about.
Yeah, it certainly has, Andy, and I think it all starts with Brandon Peters. If he doesn't have a good game, then, you know, he's not setting up his team for success. Of course, we mentioned all those other things, and I agree with you guys. You know, Illinois' offensive line needs to be able to protect Brandon to do a better job at that. Of course, Blake Gerasati stepped in last week for an injured Doug Kramer. He played center after moving over into that position, and here's what they had to say about making some improvements this week and being able to do a better job at protecting Brandon.
Obviously, you know, me looking at my personal self, being able to execute my blocks better, that's all we really can do. Each one of us has to look in the mirror and try to execute our job better. That's to be the best thing to do to help Brandon, so to do our job and to execute the play that's called upon us.
Blake did a great job, went in and played his butt off in there, but would have been great to have Doug in there and just be a little bit more healthy up front, and that matters anytime we lose somebody.
Front, as offensive coordinator Tony Peterson mentioned, Doug Kramer has been ruled healthy for this game, so it'll be great to see him back in the lineup. He's been certainly making an impact for the Illini this year, so they'll definitely need him this week against Purdue. But like we mentioned before, it's going to need to be a good game for Brandon Peters, and Tony Peterson is expecting big things from him. This is what he had to say about him this week.
You know what? He did some really good stuff, and he missed a couple reads. And by missing a couple reads, we left a couple big plays out on the table that could have made a difference right there. And he's pissed at himself, and that's what I love about him, is he's a competitor. I'm excited where BP's at and excited about him going forward.
All right, guys, let's break down Purdue a little bit. I don't know if you've seen David Bell out on the field at all yet. I know he is a big question mark here for the Boilermakers today. Their best receiver. I think it's important for Purdue especially to have, you know, one of their best players back on the field. Have you guys seen any signs of him being out there warming up yet, or just take me through, what are you guys seeing right now?
Well, I haven't had any confirmed sightings of David Bell yet.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I know. We're looking for him right now, and we can't see much. If you can see past us, I mean, Purdue is on the field. Illinois has been in there intermittently, and now they're back into the locker room behind us that direction. Purdue just has a few guys out here. I think now they've finally gotten into some of their lower pads and pants. But no David Bell yet. And Jeremy, you were just looking on your phone looking for that, because that's the big injury news for this game. It's going to be a big decider, I think, in what happens.
Yeah, Marlee was reading my mind, because I just looked at Andy and said, have you seen David Bell quite yet? And I looked up and haven't seen anything from Purdue beat writers or Purdue officially. Obviously, he was going through the concussion protocol. If anybody saw that Notre Dame game, it was a hellacious hit that he took, and a pretty scary one. You know, sometimes that concussion protocol takes 6 days or 7 days. We're right at that mark, obviously. But, you know, obviously Purdue's got a good passing attack regardless. Milton Wright is a guy that can step up, but they have, you know, if David Bell can't go, he's one of the best wide receivers. And if you remember last year's game, going up against Nate Hobbs, who's a starter in the NFL right now, David Bell won the game, or sealed the game with several huge catches. And he's just, I think 12 out of his 21 games, he's got 100+ yards. So when you got that kind of player, if maybe Illinois for once can get some injury luck on their side, they're hoping so, because Purdue's already without Xander Horvath, who's their best, toughest runner, and then to be out Rashawn Rice and David Bell, if David Bell can't go today, that'd be 3 key weapons for them that are out. They have other talented pieces. Illinois' defense still has to play well, but it certainly would be a break for Illinois.
And QB, who's going to be throwing the ball to David Bell, is, I don't want to say a question mark for Purdue, but they have their guy that's been there for a while, but
they make it a question mark.
They do make it a question because the walk-on comes in and he looks good as well. What do you make of the quarterback spot?
Yeah, I feel like Jeff Brom gets a little cute sometimes with the quarterback. I mean, I remember back with David Blau and Elijah Sinclair, he used to rotate quarterbacks, and I've never been a fan of rotating quarterbacks because here at Illinois, I've never seen it work, and I just, my Bears do it now, and I'm not a big fan of it.
Not this week.
Yeah,
not this week.
Yeah, that's true. I'm very excited about that. But like last week, Jack Plummer was playing pretty well against Notre Dame. His offensive line didn't play well, so they put in Aiden O'Connell, who did move the ball but did throw 2 interceptions. Kind of bad luck for him. Both those guys are very similar quarterbacks, very similar, can do the same things on the field. Both, Jack Plummer's got 7 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He was benched last week. I just wonder, what does that do to a guy coming into this game? Does he feel pressure that, hey, if I don't make this play or if I don't force this play? So I just feel like Jeff Brom maybe makes it an issue when it shouldn't be. But either way, Purdue does have the quarterback advantage coming into this game. But there's just some questions on their offense. Their defense has taken strides forward. They have new staff members on that side of the ball. And when you have a guy like George Karlaftis, I think he lifts an otherwise subpar defense. Maybe like Whitney Merciless did 10 years ago. Karlaftis has that kind of impact where he just makes everybody better. That's probably going to force Illinois to double team him, which opens up opportunities for everybody else. So Purdue doesn't scare me, but they have been better, and I think they have better top-end players than Illinois, obviously.
And there's a whole rivalry factor in this as well. The Cannon is up for grabs. It's switched places a bit over the last few years. Purdue with it now. Do you think that has been, it seems like on social media it's been made a big point by this coaching staff to this group of players who, may not realize that this is a rivalry trophy game. I don't think it gets hyped up as much as some of the other trophy games, but this is a big deal. Do you think that's going to pay off for Illinois in the end?
Listen, I don't know how much people care about that stuff, but I think people should. I think, rivalry games should matter, but the reason it hasn't mattered to Illinois is because they're not winning them enough. I mean, the Illabuck, we can talk about that. Not even a rivalry for Ohio State standards. Northwestern, Pat Fitzgerald owns Illinois right now. And to be honest, Purdue has not been good for the last decade. I believe they have 7 of the last 9 in this rivalry game. Illinois did win the last time here, though. So you hope Illinois can take this one back home. But for me, more importantly, is Purdue and Illinois are very similar programs. I always call them sister programs because they care more across the street about what happens over there at Mackey Arena, basketball. Illinois is the same way at State Farm Center. But Purdue has shown improvement under Jeff Brom. Illinois is still trying to find and lift themselves in the Big Ten West. And I think this is the #1 program you got to lift yourself over because it's a program that hasn't had a great history. Is kind of number 3 in its state when you talk about Power 5 football. So I feel like this is the program you want to take a step over, kind of like Nebraska right now, if you're going to climb your way up in the Big Ten West. I think you have to start beating the teams that are on your tier or on the tier you aspire to be. And that right now, I think that's Purdue. I think Purdue is a vulnerable team and a vulnerable program, but Illinois, no one else outside of Illinois should have confidence that Illinois can beat them because they just haven't shown it consistently.
And speaking of Jeff Brom, I know he's well into his tenure here. He came from Western Kentucky. He was that guy who seemed like the surefire thing to possibly be able to make football work here at Purdue, or at least make it work for the first time in a long time, it feels like. What do you make of what he's done with the program so far?
I think he's obviously lifted it. I mean, getting to 2 straight bowl games after what he took over from Darrell Hazel, which was an awful program at that time, I think was phenomenal. He had a lot of transfers to help him do that, kind of like Brett Bielema's trying to do. But he hasn't been able to withstand that, despite turning that early success into great players. I mean, Karlaftis, Rondale Moore, Milton Wright, David, these are 4-star, top 200 prospects who Illinois hasn't had a chance to get those kind of players, but he hasn't had the depth quite yet. He hasn't fixed the offensive line. Quarterback's kind of been in flux, and their defense just hasn't been good enough the last couple of years. So they've missed bowl games the last 2 years, and for them, this is a must-win because they have Illinois and Minnesota the next 2 weeks. These are 2 big games. If they can get to 4-1, this team's probably going to a bowl game. They're back on the right track. If they lose this one, Jeff Brown's making too much money after his flirtation with Louisville. He's got too long of a contract for them to fire him after this year, and I don't think they should. But I think if you lose this game and you don't make it to a bowl game, I think people at Purdue are wondering, is this guy worth the $5+ million we're paying him? He's lifted us, but he hasn't sustained it quite yet. So this is a big game for Purdue as well, and they know they need to get this win if they want to get to the postseason.
All right, battle for the Purdue Cannon. Before we get to our predictions, let's get some last thoughts, Jeremy. I still have no confirmation of David Bell, so you guys may have to look out on social media after this gets done to figure that out. And again, it's going to be a big part of what happened in this game. What are your final thoughts before we get into predictions?
I don't know why, but I feel like this is Illinois' most winnable Big Ten game left. Like, I know there's Rutgers coming up, and they're vulnerable, and that's at home. But I do feel like this is one of Illinois' last chances to kind of build some momentum for this season. Purdue is a heavy favorite in Vegas, and a lot of people that are smarter than me about the odds are even taking Purdue with the points, with 11 points. But I just feel like if Illinois' defense can build on last week, they have a chance to win this game. And then it comes down to execution with special teams. And can Brandon Peters in this offense and Tony Peterson, can they get you something? You've got to have some life in this game. They haven't given you a chance to win the last couple of weeks. So I just think the pressure's on the offense, but there's also pressure on the defense to kind of repeat what they did last week. I think Illinois should have a chance to win this game. If they do, can they figure out what they didn't execute last week and turn it into a win and kind of head into October, going into Charlotte with a chance to get to 500, right? And then going to the back end of the schedule. Maybe they can beat Northwestern. Maybe they can beat Rutgers. And maybe they could flirt with a bowl game towards the end of the year. If they don't win this game, I don't think there's any chance of any of that stuff.
The big game to kind of the balance of the season, right, is kind of in the balance right now. And here's a look at the uniforms. I don't know if anyone cares about this, but we got orange helmets, white jerseys, orange pants, different than what they were on the road against Virginia. I know, Jeremy, I don't think you're much of a uniform person, so we won't get much into that.
I do love the Stormtrooper look, but as long as there's white and orange on the road.
There you go. All right, your prediction for today's game, what do you got?
I don't know why. Maybe it's because people were hating on me. I don't think it was. I just think the matchup-wise, Illinois is going to have a chance. I had Illinois winning this game. If David Bell is out, I think Illinois has no excuse not to have a chance to win this game. And I do think there are things they can exploit with Purdue. I'm probably crazy. This might be my last bit of optimism in this first half of the season. But I just think Purdue is vulnerable today. And I think if Illinois executes its game plan like it did against Nebraska, if it lets the other team make mistakes, it doesn't make the mistakes, I think they should have a chance to win this game at the end. So I picked Illinois 23-21. Call me crazy. 23-21.
All right, I'm going to operate, and this is no insider knowledge, I'm going to operate my prediction on the assumption that David Bell is playing. So I'm going to go Purdue wins this one. I do think it's going to be a grinded out game, and maybe they get a couple of touchdowns at the end to just kind of put it out of reach. I'm going to go 31-17 Purdue. And again, that is
probably
assuming
a smarter pick.
that is assuming David Bell is going to play. My prediction goes out the window if David Bell does not play, because I think Purdue then becomes a very one-dimensional or no-dimensional offense at that point if he's out of the game. But Marlee, that's all we got from you from here. But Jeremy, you want to shout anything out on IlliniInquirer.com?
We'll just have all your coverage, live updates. We'll have the injury updates whenever we get them. And then, of course, all the post-game reaction. We'll have your quick hits, my column, and everything you can get from the players and coaches.
That's right. We're going to have post-game here as well. Stay tuned tonight as well at 6 and 10 for even more coverage. But from West Lafayette, that's all we got, Marlee. We'll send it back to you.
All right, guys, thank you so much. Purdue, 11-point favorites in this one. Vegas picks Purdue, but your predictions say otherwise. But, guys, thank you so much for joining us there from Ross Ade Stadium. It's a 2:30 kickoff on Big Ten Network as Illinois tries to get back in the win column. I don't want to say this is a must-win for Illinois because every game should be a must-win for any program, but I think for Illinois to get a win today and send them into another non-conference game against Charlotte, I think will be a big advantage for them, especially because they have a lot of tough Big Ten games to follow. They have Iowa, Wisconsin, to name a few. So Illinois certainly needs and wants a win today against Purdue. We'll leave you here with some final thoughts from Illinois head coach Brett Bielema and what this game means for them.
You know, first it's a rivalry game, obviously a trophy game with a Cannon Trophy, so that jumps out to our guys right away, but it's our first Big Ten road game. Purdue is Purdue, Illinois is Illinois. I think it's offense, defense, or special teams. We have to stay true to what we believe in will make us have success.
All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Your Illini Nation pregame show. For Andy Olson, Jeremy Werner, I'm Marlee Wierda. Be sure to tune in tonight on WCIA at 6 and 10. We'll have highlights and a report coming from Andy Olson. Of course, Jeremy Werner has you covered on Illini Inquirer. That's going to do it for us today. Enjoy the game, and we'll see you next time here on the Your Illini Nation pregame show.